let's go on to the next slide, Jana.
Okay.
Which I think has the housekeeping on it, right?
Yep.
So welcome everyone, and thank you everybody for muting your audio when you're not speaking. And as you notice there's a URL. Maybe Jenna, could you drop that into the chat so that people can pick it up rather than having to try and remember or type that in independently. It's also in the email. So if you look in the chat on, you'll see it. And I guess if there are any major issues that come up, then we can talk about them at the end. And I guess most importantly probably is that these slides will be available to look at and read directly immediately after this meeting. So let's go on to the next one. Thanks everybody for joining. So what we thought we'd do is essentially give you a status update on where we're at, talk a little bit about migration of data and users, some information about documentation, new documentation system that we're slowly introducing, some user training, and then a Q&A at the end. So next slide, please. So I guess for many of you, you will have seen this slide in the past, so I won't spend much time on it except to comment really that I think next week is the week when we hope we can begin registering users onto the new system. There is a registration process because we're moving to, as we'll comment later, to two-factor authorization to get users onto the system, and there's a jump node that you have to land on first. So if all goes well, we will, and we're doing some testing, some user testing this week. But if all goes well with that, then next week we should be able to begin moving users over in batches, probably. Not quite sure what size those batches will be at the moment, but you'll be told. And then on the 6th of August, we'll begin some training session, and that will be, as we point out later, at the kind of fundamental level of, how do I get on? Where are things? How do I find out what's here? Those sorts of questions. And hopefully, and if all goes well, all users should be off PAN later towards the end of August, as well as all the Coupe users, because some of you will recall that that we moved Fitzroy users on to Coupe, which is also in Auckland, physically in the same data centre as PAN, back in November, and then we'll move them back to Maui once it's operational as well. And as you can see, PAN is scheduled for decommissioning mid-September. So these dates, as always, are slightly variable depending on what experiences we have along the way. But I suspect these are probably as close as we can estimate at this point, and they're probably pretty accurate, I would guess. And Jana's put in a link there at the bottom, which essentially gives you an ongoing update of where we're at. So if you really want to find out what the status is right now, if we've got new information, it will go on that particular web page. Next one, please. So where we're actually at, and I apologise if some of you have heard this already, we had a bunch of scientific benchmarks that we use for the request for proposals, and the vendors had to respond to. They then had to demonstrate that those benchmark tests ran as fast on the delivered machine as they promised it would be. So we passed all of those tests back in March, actually. And we also had Filesystem Bandwidth and metadata data tests, so that's the I/O subsystem of the systems. And they all passed at the same time. One of the particularly nice features that happened is that the version of GPFS, which is actually no longer called GPFS, is now called Spectrum Scale. They came out with a new version which gave us of the order of a 20% boost in performance and metadata performance, and even a boost in the bandwidth of the file system. And so we've upgraded from GPFS version 4 to version 5, which was a complete rewrite of the file systems. We then did some testing where we put around a 90% load on both the Cray XC50, which is Maui, and the Cray CS400, which is Mawika. And we ran them flat out for, I think, something like 4 or 5 days, find out if there were any. And the first time we ran it, we found that not muted to mute, please. Mute, please. Thanks. We ran, and the first time we ran this endurance testing, a number of the InfiniBand switches in the top of rack overheated, which was just a case of figuring out why and fixing it. Then kind of the ultimate, or one of the key tests was a black start. So this is where we have the machine running at full load, both machines running at near full load. We tell this machine that there's been a cooling failure, or we simulate telling the machine there's been a cooling failure. It does a shutdown, and then we power everything off in the data center, including all the plant, and then we bring it all back up again using the agreed procedures. And so that was completed about a week and a half ago. And we think there's probably still a few things that we're learning from that that didn't quite come back as we expected. The second last bullet point, configuration of OpenStack, which is a key feature of how we manage the systems, and Slurm, which is, of course, how you run jobs, is still a work in progress. But it is a work in progress, and there don't seem to be any gotchas at this point, but it's not complete. So the test users that we'll put on this week will have not a complete system, and some of the things won't be complete next week either, but we'll be close enough, we think, to be able to expose those systems to users. And then in terms of data and user migration, what we've been doing is we've migrated the data from the PAN file system over to the HPCF here, which is the common name we're calling for the infrastructure here, which has Mawika and Maui and the shared storage in it. And so that's been copied over, and then we will resync, because of course you will continue to work on, those of you who are on PAN, you will continue to work on PAN and create new files and delete files, and so we will continue to sync up until the point when we say, essentially from today you should start using Mawika rather than PAN. And at that point the syncing will stop and you'll be on. And as we said earlier, we'll put some tests. I think we have nine test users for her, Rob, or George. Is it 9 at this point? That we will try this week to find out the things that we need to think some more about. So next slide, please. Oh, just some pictures. Cray XC50s eventually get a nice, pretty picture on the front of them. At the moment, it just has black panels, which is the box on the right. The storage row, which is actually the longest row, is in the middle, and that's the IBM ESS storage. And on the left is Mawika, which is the PAN follow-on, and that's the first five blue lights in that rack, in that line, are Mawika, and remaining 3 are part of Maui. And it's sitting in the data center here in Wellington. And those are all nicely secured to the concrete floor below. And the picture on the right shows you what happens when you look at Mawika from the side opposite to the one you're seeing in the top left image. And there are some other pictures looking at people pointing at interesting bits of hardware. Or in the case of the one on the left, that's Aaron showing what the inside of an XC50 looks like. The picture second one in from the left and the bottom, is the electrical network of the XC50. The third picture along is you're looking at the back of Mawika compute nodes, and the one on the right is the IBM storage. So pretty pictures just to see what it all looks like. It really is real. Next picture, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. So in terms of just saying a bit more about the data migration, as I said, we've done an initial synchronization of the data from PAN to the HBCF infrastructure here. Changes will be made. You're still working on the systems, and they will be picked up just prior to you being migrated as users onto the new system. Data on Coupe's file systems have not yet been moved to the HBCF. That will happen after we get users on. Essentially, once we are reasonably confident that we're getting users onto the PAN users onto Mawika, we'll then begin working on the Coupe and moving Coupe users onto Maui. So in principle, there's no action required by you. Just carry on doing your work where you're doing it. Our NeSI will move your data, and I guess the key thing here is because the new systems have new processor architectures, the installed software, that's the software that's installed by NeSI as opposed to software that you may have installed yourselves, will all be recompiled and relinked against the new libraries on these systems, and most of the software you're expecting to see should be available for you when you get there. There may be some that's missing, in which case it'll be a case of putting a message into support to see what we can do with that. Now, if you have your own software in your home directory or wherever, it may run as is, but it will not be as performant as it would be if you recompile using the latest compilers and, of course, the latest runtime libraries that will make the best use of the processor infrastructure. And if you're under problems with that, of course, NeSI staff can help you. Next slide, please. So one of the things that, and this is the part that will roll out particularly over the next few weeks, is we're trying to come up with essentially a user support portal, you might call it. It'll still be sitting at NeSI at support.nesi.org.nz, or it might alternatively have a name like docs.nesi.org.nz, but we'll let you know, and it won't matter. You'll be able to use either. Either will be aliases for the other. And essentially, it will have information, and there's a header there. And it will have basically, so it's a website which essentially will hopefully tell you everything you need to know about how to both what NeSI is, how to apply for an application, how applications are assessed, the kind of requirements you need to fall into each of the categories. There'll also be a bunch of links for the scientific computing we're doing on the system, which will also include information about the software that we are supporting on the systems. You know, what's the programming environment? Where are the manuals? What are the best? Essentially, what are the best practice guides when you're working on it? How do you use the debuggers? How do you use the performance tools? All those sorts of things that you would hope would be essentially corralled in one place will be available from this new support website. And of course, we'll also have the training material there. And then there's other information that'll come. So for example, under storage, you'll be able to understand how the file systems are being managed, the characteristics of the file systems, how to, if you accidentally deleted some data from your home file system today, how to get it back tomorrow automatically. Sorry, you can do it yourself rather, not so much automatically, but it's easy to do yourself. And also how to use things like the new librarian service, which will allow you to archive data off of disk onto tape. And then there'll also be things like, you know, what's happening, general when are the calls going out, and the key software package. We're seeing it on the right there. It appears as key software packages, but that'll ultimately be under scientific computing. It's just part of the software support tier. Now, I think so. This is so we've generated a lot of content. That all needs to be checked, and as we add the features into the services, we can expose that content to you. So it will come there. There's not much there at the moment, and at the moment we still have a mix of PAN information and the new information, and I realise that will potentially be confusing in the first instance. But as we decommission PAN, we will move those pages out of the support network, out of the support website. So feel free, if you're looking for something or you think it would be helpful to have it, just keep checking back. And if after a couple of weeks or 3 weeks it's still not there, then raise a ticket with support@nesi.org.nz, and we'll see what we can do about it. And of course, we can always answer questions that way. So we see this as a key resource that will help users make better use of the system as we go forward. So next slide, please. User training. So I guess for some of you will have been involved in, just looking at the box on the right here, with user training for the move from Fitzroy to Kupe. And so in the first instance, we will do the same for those users moving from PAN to Mawika. And kind of it is introductory, as we say here, and cover the basis of just getting started, as opposed to the more I guess the more complicated training that might relate to, say, how do I optimize my code to run on a new platform? How do I do performance profiling? How do I use the debuggers? Those sorts of things. So they will come later. So I guess the key things you're going to need are, what are the changes from the way you do things on PAN now to the way you need to do them on the Weka? How to access the systems, and the next slide will say something about that. How to transfer data onto the file systems. Where to find the installed software, how to submit jobs with Slurm, and of course how to build code. So I think, can somebody comment on how long we expect these actual training sessions to take? Are they going to be 1 to 2 hours, something of that order? Jonah?
Yeah, I think we're expecting sort of, around 3 hours, maybe up to breaks, I guess. Yeah.
And they will be quite interactive too, because we'll be running off a GitHub site at that point. Thanks, Chris. Next slide, please. So I guess I'll leave you to read those. Half-day sessions, bring your laptop, some in person and some online, with the first ones being in Auckland. And I guess, who would like to talk about how to register for these training sessions?
I can speak to that. So this is Jana with NeSI Communications, and earlier last month we put out a pre-registration call. So for anyone interested in participating in a training session, we didn't have dates or times set yet, but many people did pre-register. So everyone who signed up at that time, you can consider yourselves registered, and we will contact you to ensure if this time does work, one of the times of the sessions does work for you. If the times don't line up with your schedule, we do have that online session, but again, please aim to attend an in-person session if you can in your city, just because that will be a better delivery of the training. The online is more reserved for people in areas where an in-person session is not being held. And just because if there's quite a few people in the online session, it can be difficult to cover all of the content. So if you've pre-registered, we will contact you just to make sure that the dates and times work. If they don't, we'll suggest you attend the online session. And then if anyone has not pre-registered yet, there will be links, and we will email out where you could register to get signed up for those sessions. Thanks.
Thanks, Jenna. Okay, next slide, please. So I guess this is just a kind of a hint of, I think this is probably perhaps the most significant change that people will experience in moving to new machines. I guess as we live in a more and more insecure world, and so we are required to improve the security of access on our systems. And so the way that one of the key approaches used there is to use two-factor authentication. And so in order to log on to the new HPCs, you will need to use two-factor authentication. And the second sub-bullet point there, for those who, I guess probably nearly everybody is familiar with this, because when you log on to your online bank account, most of us have a password, and then we have a second factor sent to us by the bank on our phone. And so essentially this is the same process. So it's essentially a method of confirming the identity of the user by requiring them to present two factors. The second factor is a token generated by software on the user's mobile device. So we're using Google Authenticator here. And so just bear that in mind. And of course you need to get, you will need to register for the second factor. And so when you come to log in, you'll have to present both a password and the second factor. And it's a two-step process to actually get onto the machine. So the first step, once you have your new password and your second factor, is you'll log on to a lander node, or some people would call it a jump node, where you can do essentially nothing except log in. And then from there, you SSH onto the login or the build node of the machine for which you are targeting. You are targeted to. So that might be Mawika 01 or Mawika 02, which are the two build nodes for Mawika, or Maui 01 and Maui 02, the two build nodes for Maui. And then ultimately, we will enable people to log on to virtual labs in the same sense, although that's not possible at the moment. That virtual lab capability will come along a little bit later. We'll roll it out. So I guess the key thing, and the reason, and just so everybody knows and is aware, what we will do obviously is the lander node will be kept up to date with every change and every fix that needs to be applied. And we will monitor everybody who lands on this node, and we'll be looking very carefully to manage security risks there, as you would expect, because it's your data we're protecting as well as the systems. So prior to accessing the new platforms, you will need to register with NeSI to obtain your second factor and the password, and the new password. So essentially, this will require setting up a user account. It's not very straightforward. It's a complicated process, and when you get this, you'll be able to click on the link, and it will take you through, and in fact even show you screenshots of what you should see as you go. And I think it's maybe, I'm sorry to say, maybe 5 pages long, but it does have screenshots in there, which is the reason why it's as long as it is. There is a much shorter worded version. And I guess the only thing I would comment to you is, don't assume that you've read it before you charge in. Please read it through and just work through gently each step as you go, and follow, because some of the instructions are not as intuitive as we would like them to be. Unfortunately, we don't have control over some of the text that appears on your screen, and we just have to go with what we're using something called FreeIPA to authorize users, and we just need to go with what that provides for us at this point. So the instructions are there. They will be clear. They are slightly complicated, and please just follow them through, and please read each word. And I guess if you do run into the problem, of course, then you can send a message to support@nesi.org.nz. Of course, if lots of you run into problems, it will take a while to work your way through all of those. So everybody's been warned as best we can. And I apologize, but there's nothing we can do about that. You only have to go through this painful process once. And then once you're there, it's easy. It's only the first time that it takes this long process. and you start by requesting a user account at the NeSI portal. So I guess so. Please don't go ahead and do that now. Once you have this, we will notify you when you can start going through this process. We expect it to be next week. If some of you should try today and you run into troubles, what we would, or this week, what we will do, because we're still working hard on getting the systems ready for users, is we'll simply delay responding until we have time to do it, which will be later next week. So just hold back. All I would suggest is just hold back, and all good things will come to those who wait. Okay, next slide, please. Well, there we are. So I'm not sure, are there online questions that people want to speak to? I'm not looking at them, sorry.
So Michael, there are quite a few questions on the Google Doc. So people have been writing questions. I wonder if we should talk through those.
Yeah, let's bring them up. Yeah, let's bring up the questions.
Jana, are you able to share the Google Doc?
Yep, the 1 second.
And obviously,
bear with.
Yeah, that's all good. And obviously for everyone on the call, we're happy to take any random questions through the support at NeSI email. And so if you have any ongoing questions about your allocation, about access, about software or anything, don't take this document and this event as the one opportunity. You can ask us at any time.
Are you seeing the questions now?
Yeah, do you want to zoom it in just a little bit so that as we scroll down, we can sort of, everyone can read that as we go? So Michael, do you want to talk through it, or would you like me or someone else to talk through it?
I'll start, and then when I become incompetent, I'll pass it on to somebody else.
Unlikely, Michael, unlikely.
Oh, no. So when can we get access to virtual labs? Virtual labs are phase 2 rollout of the service, and so I don't think we can make a promise. That's our point at this point is to get all the users on, and then introduce new. So at least not break anything in the first instance, and then introduce new services as we can. And so my expectation is that virtual labs should be able to be made available probably by the end of September. It's that kind of time frame. It won't be in August because we'll spend most of our time getting users on during August, and because remember we're moving both PAN and Coupe users.
Yeah, and I guess the other point, Michael, is that we're looking at creating community environments, and so we're keen to hear from community to have a broader need. It's not going to be like a cloud environment for individual users to run individual types of workloads. So we are looking at trying to understand what the needs are and balancing what those needs across the whole of New Zealand are versus what we build. So even in September or the rest of this year, we will be working to see how those virtual labs evolve.
Yeah, it will be an evolving, indeed, it'll be evolving. But I guess the key thing to think about in terms of the virtual labs or maybe virtual workstations is another way of thinking at it, is that it gives you interactive access. If you're logged on to a virtual lab or virtual workstation, it gives you interactive access to any data that you have on the HPC file systems. And any tools that you have available, so all of the tools that you have available probably on your PC or your workstation should also, unless they're proprietary obviously, or maybe Windows-based, should be available on these virtual workstations. And ultimately, when we are able to provide cloud-based services, private cloud, we can probably extend that even further in terms of capabilities. So can I only use the new hot dog machines if I have explicitly submitted a proposal requesting access to these machines? Well, because these become the replacement machines for Fitzroy and PAN, if you are a NeSI researcher and you are applying for access, you will be given an allocation, assuming you pass the tests. You will be given an allocation on these machines, and as I said, on the new user support portal, we'll make clear how each of these, how each of the types of proposals are in fact assessed, so you can see and understand that more clearly. Sorry, feel free. So if the person who asked the question and I haven't answered the question to your satisfaction, jump in and ask for clarification from us. Okay, what sort of performance improvement, % reduction in computing time can be expected from the use of these new machines? So when we were doing the performance benchmarks, because on PAN, so if we think about PAN, we had you had 3 generations of chip on that machine, chips from essentially from Westmere, which came out in 2009, through to, I think Sandy Bridge was, maybe you had some Ivy Bridge, I can't remember. But most of the nodes were Sandy Bridge nodes, and they're from something like 2013. And then you had some faster ones, a small, another 1,000 cores of slightly faster systems. So on the new systems, everything is Broadwell. And when we did the benchmark testing, it looked like the performance improvement was of the order of a factor of 2. It will vary from one code to another, obviously. Perhaps the biggest improvement will be the change in performance. So if you're doing much I/O, so if you're writing files or reading large quantities of data, or even if you're writing small quantities of writing and reading small quantities of file, as some software does, I think you'll probably see the biggest improvement there, because on PAN, the total bandwidth to the back-end file system was about 1.5 gigabytes a second. And to give you a sense, a single node could probably write of the order of 2 or 3 gigabytes a second, or single core can write 2 or 3 gigabytes a second to the back end. So it doesn't take very many. As you can see, that's higher than the rate can actually go to the back end. On the new systems, now shared between both Maui and Moeka, the file system bandwidth is, total bandwidth is 130 gigabytes a second. So you can think of that as almost 100 times improvement on what you had on PAN. You obviously, Moeka users are not going to get all of it because it's being shared between the 2 machines. But at the times when one machine is not using it, the other will get everything that's available. And so if you're writing, if you have a piece of code, or sorry, a job which is I/O intensive, I anticipate you'll see a big improvement in performance, because before that was showing as a delay in elapsed time, which was not due to the processors at all, but probably due to essentially congestion at the back end. And so when we did the I/O benchmark test, we were able to demonstrate that from the compute nodes on Moeka to the back-end storage, we got just a touch under 140 gigabytes a second. And in terms of metadata, so when you're doing essentially the equivalent of metadata operations, which is opening files, closing files, doing an ls of files, it was performing at nearly 200,000 IOPS per second. So these numbers are vastly different from what you had on PAN or we had on Fitzroy. On Fitzroy, for example, we had a bandwidth of about 8 gigabytes per second and a very low IOPS performance from metadata. Sorry. It will be great to have a guideline to include common for submission checking for project priority and queue example for project submission will be helpful. So I guess we will try and I presume you mean which includes commands for submission, is it, as opposed to commons? Checking for project priority and queue. Does anybody else want to? Is Peter here? Peter, do you want to talk to that one? Maybe Peter's not on the call.
Yeah, I am. Sorry, it's just the windows in the background.
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
I'm the one. I think I'm the one who said, "What does this question mean?" And let me just get my bearings. Okay. Okay, this one. Yeah, I mean, no comment. I don't think the change of platform changes the fact that, of course, we do provide, and we will continue to provide examples of how to submit an R job and documentation on how to see what's in the queue and where your job's priority is at. We currently provide that, and we will provide it in the future. So I'm not quite clear. That's why I thought maybe there was a typo in this question. That's all I can say.
Does the person who asked that want to follow up with a verbal question?
I guess one other comment is one thing we're looking at doing, Michael, is improving the visibility of the queues to users over time. And that will be something that where users can see how active particular queues are. And so when they go to submit, they can understand and anticipate what their job start time might be.
Yeah, in fact, that's a good point. I guess one of the things that we're aiming for with the new version of the HPC Compute and Analytics Service is to give users much greater visibility at what the machine is doing and how it's loaded. So eventually the support portal will have real-time information coming out, which is showing you what the current load is on the machine, the queue wait times, how many jobs in the queue, how many jobs are currently running in each of the queues, the kind of material that will help you to understand why your job might not be running at this point. And I guess another point we'll do is when you, in terms of trying to increase or enable you to make better decisions, is that when you log on, you'll be able to see, you'll get a splash screen which will tell you, for example, how much of your allocation you've used and how much is still available. We'll also show you, not initially, but later, we'll show you how much storage you have used and what your quotas are. And we'll also include information about what your current fair share factor is for your project. If you've been using lots and lots of resource over a short period, you might find that your ability to run new jobs has gone down simply because you're using your quota up faster than we have to plan for its use. But we're trying again to make that information available. Another thing we'll do, when your job completes, you'll get a summary of some critical information about A, what you asked for, and B, what you used. So how much memory did you ask for? What was the peak memory usage you actually achieved while running the job? How many cores did you ask for? How many do you use? And again, the whole idea of this is to help you fine-tune your job submissions in the future. So it gives you information which will help you to better utilize the machine in the future. In terms of data analytics tools, a couple of points here. On Maui, we will have a package called Eureka XC, which is the software version of the Cray Eureka hardware tool for doing machine learning, deep learning, and it has a very extensive set of software for doing machine learning, deep learning, etc. And it will be particularly in our case because Maui is largely a Xeon processor box. Sorry, Maui, the XC50 is just a Xeon processor box. On the CS500, on Eureka, there's TensorFlow will certainly be there. It's there by default. But there will be other, I would imagine, as the answer says, yes, it should be easy to install some of these additional deep learning, machine learning, AI tools on the system and make them available. In fact, it's highly likely that Cray will release something called Eureka CS, which will be a CS version of their deep learning tool. So if you do a search on Eureka XC, you'll find out a lot more about that. And we hope that later in the year we'll be able to run some training sessions. We will bring Cray specialists on machine learning, deep learning out to provide training for people who are particularly interested in this. A number of us went to the Cray user group meeting in Stockholm in May, and they did a one-day essentially workshop on the use of Eureka XC, and my sense is that there's an awful lot to learn, and there's an awful lot that you can do where you can go badly wrong and very slowly compared to it when you know what you're doing, and they go much faster. So I think that will be a really good opportunity for the community, the science community in New Zealand, to learn a lot more about these kinds of tools. And Cray obviously has some additional components which make use of its clever features in, say, in the network or in their own optimization of key packages like Python.
So Michael, just quickly on that, I guess as per one of the answers onto that one, where software is only needed by one or two users, we give the ability for users to install and trial. But if there is a growing sense that multiple people want applications, then NeSI will take on some responsibility for installing it. If it becomes a major piece, then we will look after it, we will benchmark it, and we will write documentation to support it. So it really comes down to usage, will depend on which role NeSI plays in that.
Yeah, I think that's thanks, Rob. That's a really nice point, because one of the things in terms of the new user support portal, we're trying to move towards, as many HPC centers do, basically having software which we manage very carefully, which is used by a wide community, and which we keep up to date with this extensive documentation, and in some cases we'll even have experts on NeSI staff who can help users, all the way down to well, you can install this in your home directory or in the project directory associated with your project, and then it's available to you to use wherever you want. So yes, there'll be tiers of software support, and that will all be clear in the documentation. If I have my user on PAN, onto which platform you're going to move my data and my user? Well, it's a shared file system, and you will end up as, it'll be /home/username will be where your home directory is, and then we have a project directory, so it'll be /NeSI/project/project code like UOA 00000 and then you can put whatever you want. You can have the users within there, or whatever is most sensible. But I guess the big difference between PAN and Mawika and Maui is that whereas on PAN you had a very small scratch file system which you essentially almost didn't use. It was used for you. On Mawika and Maui, we have a 4.5 petabyte scratch file system. It's the highest performance file system. It's the place where you will do all your computation, where you need high performance. It's called /NeSI/no backup, because that's what it is. There is no backup, and so anything you put in there, you should assume can go away. But there will be a large /NeSI/project file system in which you can hold data that is backed up each day and persist. And then there is an archive system which allows you to copy data onto tape. Can I currently use docs.nesi.org.nz to access NeSI support documentation? Well, there's the answer. Not yet. It's coming though. I am one of the test users. I just got an email that my allocation will stop for 4 months and may restart in December. Is there any way not to have this gap in between? I'm not sure what that means.
So I can speak to that, Michael.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
So some people may know that we're moving to a call schedule for allocations from the merit and postgraduate classes. And since we don't know ahead of time what class your next allocation will come from, we wanted to give people plenty of advance warning so that if their allocation was due to end between now and the 1st of December, they could get their application for a new one into us so that there isn't that interruption period. It's possible that whoever put this question in was not aware that we were just contacting that person ahead of time. However, you say that you've already put a Zendesk ticket in, and so we should be able to get to that fairly shortly to make sure that you're not left with a gap during which you won't have an active allocation.
Yeah.
But we can't guarantee that. For example, if you're from a university like NeSI or Waikato that doesn't have an institutional subscription, or that does, but you can't get an allocation from it, that may be a little bit more awkward.
So one more question from me. Are the NVIDIA CUDA NN libraries a priority? Will they always be kept up to the latest version? So we've just installed Cray programming environment 18.0.6, which has CUDA 9.1 in it. And Cray releases its programming environments on a 6-monthly basis. And so I presume, while 9.2 is now out, I imagine that the next one will be whatever CUDA is out at that point. I don't know whether others want. I think Mandis has been working on that. Mandis, do you want to comment on CUDA or Wolfgang?
Yes, I can. It's a bit tricky question. It's not all about the libraries. It's also about the CUDA driver, right? And they're not always working nicely together. So I already tested the latest version we have installed, 9.1, which is so far not working really well with the driver, but we will go back to Cray and fix that. So in general, I agree with you. We will go with kind of the more or less the latest version, but yes, maybe we will have a certain delay importing that on our machine.
Thank you. I don't know what a net logo experiment is, so I'll let somebody who does know what that is respond.
Yeah, Wolfgang, you seem to be answering. Do you want to talk to it while you're typing?
Okay, I think I'll probably best stop typing then. So I think the best thing to do would be to look at this case specifically, because the answer is not immediately clear what would be the best thing. There's a few factors that come to mind there. So whether these experiments, how many threads they can use, how well they scale, does it have to run within one node, how many different experiments should run at the same time, how long is each experiment. So there's a large number of parameters that will then determine which is the best answer to that question. But the best thing to do is to look at that case carefully. So I don't know who wrote the question, but please send an email to us, and then we'll look at that and can give you hopefully a useful answer.
Thanks, Wolfgang. I mean, I guess in general, we're always happy to work with researchers to help optimize usage. Where the usage is optimized on the platform, it typically means you use less of the platform, which means there's more platform for everyone else. So, and it typically better utilizes the capability to run parallel and other things. So don't hesitate to put in a request asking for help to optimize. We will happily do that.
This is true that using the maximum number of cores available does not provide the best throughput automatically. If the machine is busy, then it could be better, as you suggest, I think, it could be better to use less cores and get faster throughput overall. So it's quite a complex game to optimize this. So that's why I think it's best to look at the case specifically.
Very good.
So what happens if you don't have a smartphone? I suggest a $19 investment at Warehouse. Sorry. That is possible.
You can also use your other mobile devices. So if you have a tablet of some kind, it doesn't have to be a smartphone. Yes, if you have a iPad, that will also work.
Oh yeah. Anything that's it needs to be something in essence that you own. That's the key point. Any more comments or questions?
Is it possible to ask questions with the audio now?
Yeah, please do.
Well, first, a quick comment. I didn't know that it wasn't really quite time to start trying to set up an account. So I have been doing that in the last couple of days, and I did manage to go through the two-factor authorization or authentication process. But this morning, I've been unable to connect to the lander node. Is that something that is it out of commission? I just can't make a connection. Can't get to
login. So which lander node are you? I guess
lander.nesi.org.nz.
Yeah. Is Aaron on the call?
No.
Is Fabrice? Yeah, Fabrice may be able to comment on this one. Fabrice?
Do you repeat the question, please?
I cannot connect to the lander node. Is it down?
It shouldn't be down. Let me check and get back to you. What's your name? Gib? Okay.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, please do.
Using the authenticator method, the two-factor method, I'm sort of curious just to know how the syncing works. I mean, how is it automatic that your phone is always going to be in the same time, synced in time with the server?
I guess the same question applies with you when you log on to your bank account using the factor they just sent you through a text.
No, my bank doesn't do that, so I don't know about that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how the magic works, but it does.
Okay. And what's the time window once you get your number?
I think it's 10. Is it 20 seconds? I think it's normal. I think it's
30 seconds, I believe.
30
for the second factor, yes.
So you have to move pretty quick. Yeah.
So the trick is to wait till the new number comes up and then type that one in.
Right. Okay. Now this is a slightly different question that maybe you can't address now, but on PAN, I have been using tools that were developed by, not initially for me, but for somebody else, I think, remote job submission tools, CER tools set, which enabled a job to be submitted from a Windows PC, and it would automatically upload the necessary input files, and when the job is completed, it will download the output files. I'm wondering how anything like that could work with this two-factor process.
Yeah, we're aware of that one. There are two of you still using that software.
Two of us, okay.
And the author of that software, Martin from Centre for E-Research, will be back from leave at the end of the month.
Right.
And so I think maybe it's a question for him.
Sure.
I believe he has found a way of making it work for the other person involved, Nick Holford. Whether or not Michael will be happy with that way of making it work or will say it's against our terms and conditions remains to be seen.
Okay, thanks. So somebody's looking into it. That's the main.
Yeah, we are aware of the issue. Yeah, and can't make absolute guarantees, but we're aware of it.
Right. Thank you.
I guess the only the only other comment I'd make is that I guess one of the and feel free, anybody feel free to jump on me with a comment like you clearly don't understand what I'm trying to do, and that's fine. I guess one of the things that we will get with the new machines that was more of a problem with PAN is a very large file system, and then shortly thereafter we'll also get an ability to interactively work on that file system. This is the virtual labs, and ultimately we will probably also be able to spin up virtual machines which actually have a Windows operating system and which can also attach to the same file system. And although those are things in the future, but I guess the point I'm making really is that one of the design goals is to enable people, to enable researchers to use in essence the rich environment that you're going to have on the HPC to actually do your research there, rather than having to shuffle data from your laptop or your local server up to the HPC, compute and then copy it off because there isn't enough room on the system to leave it there or to archive it and then bring it back for use later. And so I guess there may ultimately be some opportunities to change work practices to take advantage of the new capabilities that you'll get on the new systems.
That sounds very, very interesting and very useful. The issue really in my case is more that there'll be other people who want to use these programs, and they won't be people who are necessarily able or willing to get into all the intricacies of working on the HPCF, and they would rather stick on their Windows machines. And I'm trying to think ahead to accommodating those users.
Yes, I guess it'll be. Obviously Peter knows about your work, and so I guess that's a good conversation to have.
Yeah, not in detail, to be honest. As with Nix, it would be good sometime to really understand the whole thing and really understand the problem from the ground up as to why it has to be done from two ends. But it's just we've been particularly busy over the last few months and will remain so over the next probably 2 months or so. But at some point, I would really like to get to the bottom of that.
Yeah.
Sure. That's something for the future. Yeah.
Thank you for raising it.
Thank you.
Fabrice, you were going to respond to the Lambda node issue?
Yeah, it's up. I replied to him. It's up. It's working.
So why would it not have been contactable?
He can send an email what kind of error is getting.
Yes, I'm having a conversation with him on support right now, I think. So
the issue is just a timeout. It doesn't wait for the connection. It never comes, and then it times out.
I'm having the same thing. I can't ping the Lambda node. I can resolve it to an IP address, but it won't respond to pings.
So the only thing I'm thinking is that we, in order to make live the Lambda nodes, so the Lambda node you're actually talking to is physically in Hamilton, and it's the one that is primarily being used by users of Coupe. There will be 2 additional Lambda nodes for use for Mawiki and Maui, and a new IP and DNS entry was put into the system this morning. So we'll figure that one out and find out if we've managed to break something. So Ben, you were saying you can log on if you use the IP address. You just can't use the
No, I didn't say that. I said that if I ping it, I can resolve the IP address for it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm not sure if that means there's a DNS issue or not.
Yeah.
I don't know whether the IP address is the correct one. If I put it in the chat, shall I send it to Fabrice?
Yeah.
Just so with our last couple of minutes here, there's a couple of questions that don't have an answer yet. One of them is about using Docker on the machines, and then there's a question at the very end that is asking if people outside of researchers at universities can use the systems. So the first one about Docker.
Yeah, so at this point, Docker does not play very friendly on HPC systems, and so at this point, there'll be no Docker. But there is, we will think about how to deal. So I know that there is active work going on, and Cray is very much involved in this and making. So on the XC system on Maui, there is something called Shifter, which is a Docker-like containerization. The issue for the cluster Mawika is more complex. Watch the space, and we'll certainly see what we can do. Should be possible on the private cloud service that we'll offer later in the year. Sorry, that's probably not what you wanted to hear, but it is. The problem is a security one, unfortunately, still. But it is one that's being actively worked on. And who can have access to New Mawika apart from researchers from universities? Yes, so essentially any, so there are a number of access allocation classes is what the access policy calls them, and I would suggest the questioner for this one actually have a read of the access policy. But essentially, if you're from a collaborating institution, which is Auckland University of Otago, Manaki Whenua, Landcare Research, or NIWA, you automatically have the ability to apply for an allocation on the machine. If you're not at those institutions, let's say you're at the university, NeSI University, then you would have the ability to connect to apply for an allocation under NeSI subscription. If you're not at an institution which has a subscription to access NeSI services, then there are three other possibilities for you to apply. One is called Proposal Development Grant, which is a very small allocation which enables you to get on and do some testing of code, or maybe just trying to understand a little bit more about what an HPC is and what a command line interface looks like, those sorts of things. And then there are two other classes of access. If you are a postgraduate student at a university, and it needs to be a university obviously, then you can apply for a project under the access policy. And the last one is the second last one is if you have a grant which is funded maybe by HRC or Marsden or Endeavour or one of the major, publicly funded excellence, where you have gained a research grant through excellence, then you can apply for a merit allocation on the system. And the last opportunity is if you are a commercial researcher, so you're in private enterprise, then NeSI will consider providing a contract which allows you to access services. So you essentially can contract for time on the system. So collaborator, if you're a collaborator, you're fine. In the case here, you're an independent researcher registered for it. So if you're working, for example, in a, let's say, a regional authority, and you have a research grant that demonstrates excellence, you could apply under merit. Or you could alternatively ask for you could also seek to contract services from us. George, do you want to say anything more about those?
I think you covered it, Michael. If in doubt, reach out to us and we can talk it through.
So registering you can do, getting an allocation. So in order to be able to log on to a machine, you both need to register and have an active project on what will be Mauika or Maui. So you will need both of those in order to be able to access. And as I said, the proposal development project will be easy to obtain. It's a very small allocation, but it will enable you to test the systems. Any other verbal questions from people? All right, pass back to you, Jana.
Okay, thanks very much for everyone who connected today. We will be posting a copy of the slides and a recording of today's session to the NeSI website and emailing out a recap. Thanks very much for joining us, and we will be in touch about when people can start registering for access to the new systems and when people will begin getting onto the new platforms. If you have any other further questions, don't hesitate to contact support@nesi.org.nz. Thanks.
Support.nesi.org.nz, yeah.
Right, sorry, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.